Emma, I think we've lost your audio. I don't know if that's just on my end.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Okay. Okay. And we still following my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Just one last quick plug for our DMBA boot camp before we get started today. Leland is hosting an entire boot camp about how to get into the most elite deferred MBA programs in the world. It'll be comprised of 8 live sessions, and we'll have information from 10 plus MBA admissions experts who are our most popular coaches here on the platform. Here's some information about it. It starts January 13th, ends February 5th. Here's a little link that you can follow to go ahead and get registered. As soon as I turn it back over to Yash, I'll also drop some links in the chat for everyone to, first of all, see Yash's profile, to sign up for a free Leland account, and also to have the link to sign up for the Deferred MBA application bootcamp. You're not going to want to miss this. If you are interested, I do recommend that you enroll quickly as seats are limited. Deferred MBAs are only gaining in popularity by the year. So if you're interested, make sure to secure your spot soon. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it back over to Yash, and you guys can, ask him about Deferred MBA programs.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma. Feel free to send me stuff over chat or come off mute or raise your hand, whatever works for folks. I can start looking through the chat and just answer some early questions. Amelia asked, is it really true that there's no preference for the school between GRE and GMAT? Yeah, that's absolutely true. What I recommend to clients is to just sort of take a diagnostic test for each one and sort of see how you're performing on each. And whichever one you feel like you have a better chance of success, I would go with that. Sometimes for clients that are applying to sort of dual degree programs, or they might want to be applying to a master's program later on, I recommend the GRE just because a lot of programs will take the GRE for master's programs, so that way you don't have to take 2 tests. Kyle asked, what does GSB look for? I see a lot of people who get accepted into the deferred MBA with startup or tech backgrounds. So John, the CEO of Leland, actually published a LinkedIn post you guys should check out at this point, I think maybe a couple weeks ago, where he talks a little bit about the profiles of folks that get into deferred MBA programs. I think there are a ton of folks that sort of are going into startups or tech, specifically for the GSB, given the entrepreneurship focus. But for example, I was going to be starting in consulting at BCG. I've met a lot of other deferred candidates at GSB that were going into finance or corporate strategy. So I don't know if they're looking for any specific industry. I think GSB cares about a few different things. One is exposure to leadership and a habit of leadership. Two is an entrepreneurial mindset. So that doesn't mean that you need to have started your own company, but could mean that you ran a club or started a new initiative, or sort of looked at a problem in an interesting way. And the third is academic excellence. And so that's, I think, pretty typical across programs. Anne asked, since we only have recommenders from freshman and junior internships, what are the ideal 2 recommenders? I would highly recommend not having, no pun intended, not having 2 recommenders from the same internship. I think it's completely fine to ask for a recommendation from an old freshman or internship as long as you've built a relationship with them over time. In fact, that's what I did. One of my 2 recommenders for GSB was my freshman year internship manager, and then another was someone I was more involved with at school. There's a question here about getting into deferred MBA programs with a low GPA of 3.3. Yeah, look, I think GPA is just one part of the application process. I think the best thing that you can do with the lower GPA is to focus on your test scores. Schools will sort of look at those in conjunction with one another to see if you're ready for the academic rigor of these universities. And so, again, I would say definitely spend some time if you feel uncomfortable with your GPA on the GRE or GMAT, and get those to a good level. And that's sort of the best way to mitigate that. Just chugging along here. Kayla asked, do MBA admissions have preferences about what kind of full-time job offers? Um, I think there's I've worked with clients on both ends of the spectrum. So sometimes they have a full-time offer, and I think that can be a great indication of uh like a stamp of approval from like a big company or someone that sort of vetted you, right? But I've also worked with clients who have gotten in without full-time job offers, or they're working on their own startup. And so I think they would love to understand what you are doing between graduation and matriculating to the business school, because you'll be, doing something for 2 to 4 years. And so I think the more clarity you can provide, whether that's through a full-time job offer or like a very clear focus on what you want to accomplish during that time, I think either works. Um, yeah, Jacob asked if he was a Navy diver for 6 years prior to school. That's super cool. I think it's totally fine to apply to the deferred MBA programs. There's like hard and fast criteria that schools have. As far as I know, no schools have like an age criteria, but I would just double check that. I would still highly recommend the deferred MBA programs. I think they're a great way to get into school and then get a few years of work experience. Um, Aditya asked about using a junior summer internship manager, even though you didn't take the return offer. Yeah, that's totally fine having them as a letter of recommender. I would just say make sure that in the actual letter of recommendation they highlight that you did receive a return offer in case there's any questions about that. Um, Nam asked, is it okay to not have a recommender from your internships? I think one of the two recommenders should definitely be from someone who uh, can speak to your professional capabilities. And so if that's not a internship manager, some sort of supervisor at school, or if you were like a leader of a club and you worked with a staff member, that also works. But someone should be able to talk about your sort of professional capabilities, your leadership attributes, your work ethic. So I would highly recommend someone from an internship. But if that's not possible, then I think there's other ways to supplement that. Um, you need to, Arian asked if you need to have your GMAT back before applying. Yes, you do need to have your GMAT complete before you apply to schools. The deadlines for anyone who might not be familiar are mostly in April. Some schools do rolling admissions before then, but certainly by middle of April, you should feel good. And I always tell clients to give themselves at least um, a few weeks buffer in case you do have to take the test again. Kaylin asked, would it be a disadvantage to have a professor write one of the recommendations? A lot of schools actually mandate that a professor write one of your letters of recommendations, so it would not be a disadvantage at all. Very, very common for that to be one of the two letters of recs. Ada asked if a candidate is graduating with a double major, would they still be considered STEM? Would it be more advisable to lean more into the STEM narrative? Look, I think it's important to be authentic to who you are and what you're focused on. So if you're entering a traditional field like IB and like finance is what is important to you, I would focus on that and not try to tailor your application to what you think they want to hear. Um, Especially for the top business schools, they're looking for people who are authentic, true to themselves, and have a very clear focus for their future. And so I think the more authentic and realistic you are with what you actually want to do, I think the better it is. But to answer your question directly, STEM and finance is a great combination, and they would definitely consider you as part of the STEM pool. Thomas asked that he said he knew someone that got into HBS 2+2 that visited 3 times to get his name out there. I don't think that that's necessarily like 100% needed. I think it's great to be able to visit a school if you're able to do so with your financial means and your schedule to get a better understanding of what the school is about, maybe sit on a class and just learn more. But there's other ways to do that as well. Alumni are very willing to respond to LinkedIn requests or cold emails asking them about their experiences. So I think as long as you can articulate why you want to go to HBS or any other school, you don't necessarily need to visit. But again, if you're able to, I think it's definitely it definitely helps. Kyle asks, given I had a consulting background when I applied, how did I differentiate myself? Yeah, it's a great question. And you specifically asked, especially for HBS, because they favor non-traditional background. So for me specifically, I focused on one industry, which for me was sports. I spent a lot of time in undergrad working in sports. I planned to do sports project work at BCG. And so that was a really important part of my theme. If you're going into consulting or banking, I would say I would encourage you to either think about an industry within consulting or banking that you're passionate about, or you might have done an internship in, or a job that you might, think you might get in the future that might not be related to consulting or banking. Um, Carlos asked, did I build community with other deferred applicants throughout my process? Any reflections around this? Not while I was going through the process itself. Once I was admitted to the schools, and then I ended up choosing GSB. I did do meetups and a few different things before I actually got to campus at Stanford, which was a great way to meet people early on. I think similar kind of question that traditional investment banking, private equity backgrounds. I would say try to focus on industries that will make you unique, and then sort of focus on anything unique about your firm or like your focus within private equity or investment banking that you can highlight. Amelia asked about leadership, if it's on campus or off campus. It can be either. I think uh, what I would say with leadership is make sure it's consistent, it's over time, and it's deep, not broad. They're much more likely to they like admissions committees love sort of consistency and sticking together with one particular leadership opportunity. So I would say highlight that versus highlighting doing a bunch of small things at a bunch of different organizations. I think it's more important to highlight how deeply you impacted an organization. How are international applicants studying at U.S. universities considered? Are they considered against domestic applicants from their home college or their country of citizenship? A little bit of both, honestly. I think they are definitely looking at country of citizenship like they do with any sort of process, but I think it's less pronounced than it is for the traditional MBA process. I'll answer this finance one, so I'll skip that one. Can I include my 6 years of part-time entrepreneurial experience? Yeah, absolutely. I think anything entrepreneurial is always worth including. Amelia asks, is it harder to get into deferred MBA compared to regular admissions? I don't actually know in terms of statistics of the acceptance rates. I think they're largely similar. I will say that uh, the deferred MBA talent pool is extremely strong, and as Emma mentioned, like it's just getting more and more competitive, and so I do think it's a lot more difficult now to get into the different MBAs than it was when I first got in. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's harder than the traditional admissions. I'd say it's probably the same. Um, Avi asked, how much do essays matter compared to other parts of the application? Super important. I think depends on the school in terms of their exact importance, but like for Stanford, for example, the what matters most to you and why essay is a really, really core part of the application. Amelia, is nonprofit work or policy work not common for DMBA? I assume you mean post undergrad, so that you're working in nonprofits or policy full time. That's actually quite common. Schools love like people who are working in government or nonprofit organizations or policy. So it's definitely I definitely see it a lot. Um, you're also able to apply oftentimes to the joint programs at these schools with their school of government. So like at Harvard, for example, you can apply to HBS and HKS together. Kyle asked, why did I pick GSB over HBS? It came down to a few things for me personally. I'm from the West Coast, and sort of wanted to stay in California. I really enjoyed the GSB's small class size and intimacy. I thought that GSB was a better fit for me in terms of its sports curriculum and sports alumni. And I thought that GSB offered a little bit more flexibility in terms of the curriculum as well. There's a question about how many unique students apply for different MBA programs. I'm honestly not sure how to answer that one. How much does networking with 2+2 alums in the admissions office matter before your application? Networking won't help you. I think network to the point of understanding the school, understanding what they're looking for, understanding the experiences of student life once you're there. But in terms of actually getting in, it's not important at all. Yeah, so a 730 plus is a great score, especially on the new GMAT focus. I would say my personal recommendation with studying is like time box yourself to a certain amount of time. I feel like the GMAT and GRE can take up as much time as you give it. So for me, I sort of did like pretty intense studying for 6 to 8 weeks, and that was enough for me. But I would say like dedicate, about that amount of time to study and don't let it linger for too long. Um, Kyle asked, follow up on the comment you made about focusing on sports work. What part about HBS and GSB actually solves the problem of pivoting to this type of work industry? Yeah, so I mean, both schools have great alumni in sports. They actually have sports classes. They have a sports conference, and so I really highlighted those types of things during my application process. Avi is a president of a business fraternity on campus, which isn't they're saying isn't technically a standard business related leadership opportunity, but yeah, absolutely. I think being a president of any student organization, I think is really admirable, and I think there's um, a lot of moving pieces that you have to deal with as a president of an on-campus organization. So I think that's definitely something good to highlight. NBA admissions interviews. I would say schedule a call with me and we can go into this one a little bit deeper. It's very, very different depending on which schools you're looking at. Augusta asked, would it be worth including an entrepreneurship experience for high school? I would say high school is mostly off limits unless the entrepreneurship experience extended to college as well. So Harvard and Stanford deferred MBAs. It varies year by year, but roughly you can think about 10 to 20% of their class sizes are filled through deferred MBA candidates each year. How would I recommend dividing up spaces in the MBA resume? I would say again, reach out, and I can work with you on your resume itself. It's a bit hard for me to tell without actually looking at each individual line item. I would say a pretty healthy mix of work experience and club experience is usually pretty good. Um, Paula asked, what are the best resources and books I found to study for the GMAT? I personally used Manhattan Prep a few years ago, but things have changed. I think there's tremendous coaches now in Leland. There's a lot more sort of services that offer tutoring as well. But I personally found that there was no like substitute for just working with someone and having someone guide me through the process. I personally don't do GMAT studying tutoring, so like in terms of actual tips, I would refer you to a coach on the platform that specializes in that. I took the GMAT, not the GRE. I took it just one time. I think the letters of recommendation should be different for typical masters versus different MBA. I think typical masters, you might be looking for someone a lot more technical that can speak to your technical capabilities, whereas different MBA is much more about your leadership, your ability to work in teams, things of that nature. Yes, your resume should be limited to one page. Um, which different MBA program is most suitable for a student with a BBA background? They all the programs will take someone with a BBA background, so I wouldn't limit yourself. For someone graduating in May 2026, you have a ton of time. What I always tell people is by January of the application cycle. So in your case, January 2026, I would say have your schools finalized that you want to apply to, have a good idea of who you're going to ask for your letters of recommenders, and have your tests done. And that way, between January and April, which is when most of the deadlines are, you can focus on writing essays and filling out the applications. Coming from a small school, that's totally fine. I think it's not necessarily about the number of people you manage, it's more about the impact you have. Uh, Kyle, not to like not answer your question directly, but it's tough for me to like talk about differences in culture between GSB and HBS, given I didn't go to HBS. I would say GSB is a very tight-knit community, very vulnerable community, really focused on lifting everyone up, and it's just a very positive environment overall. So I would say nothing but good things to say about GSB in particular. HBS, again, I would say sign up with a coach on Leland and see what they have to say about it. Vanessa, my timeline when I applied, I was pretty late to the process, honestly. I didn't take my GMAT until March of like 1 month before my deadlines. And luckily I was only applying to two schools, so I was able to sort of put my application together from March to April. And then yeah, the Yale Silver Scholarship Program is a great one. I think it just depends on personal preferences and where you're sort of working full time. Some consulting firms and banking firms will not allow you to like sort of um start for a year, then come back and then sort of come back to school. So it just depends on your personal situation there. Augusta, I would say give your letters of recommend or your letters, the people writing your letters of rec at least 2 months to write your letters. Aditi asked what social impact opportunities are at GSB. I can't speak specifically to the disability advocacy space, unfortunately. There's a ton of social impact opportunities. There's fully funded fellowship programs. There are a bunch of classes. There's clubs. So like, it's a really, really important part of the GSB culture. Avi, I think it's better to be well-rounded, but I honestly both a little bit. I think it's better to be well-rounded and be sort of someone who's good at a lot of different things, but have really clear passions or interests in one or two different areas. Uh, for specific questions on Yale, I would say schedule some time with me. I can look over your application and answer that. I'm less familiar with their program. My GMAT score was a 750, but that's with the old GMAT. So it's I'm not entirely sure what the conversion is now, but it's gotten lower. They've sort of done some great deflationary things. So like I think it's roughly around like a 715 or 720 now. But it's I would look at it from a percentile basis, and it was 98th percentile. The biggest mistake you've seen in apps from your clients, I think a couple things. One, they don't tailor their application to the school they're applying to. Each school is looking at something very different. Two, I would say they're trying to be someone that they're not actually, and that comes across. So to my earlier point around being authentic. And then third is that they don't spend enough time on the applications themselves. So I'd say leave yourself enough time. Vanessa, your question, I'll defer to Emma on scholarships for Leland in particular, or feel free to reach out to the Leland team for that. And then Amelia, for the percentile for the GRE and GMAT, I think 90 percentile and above is sort of what I recommend to most clients for the deferred MBA programs. I know we're 2 minutes away, so let me just quickly answer one or two more. If the average is 3.8, 3.9, I think GPA, as long as you're at or around the average, is fine. It won't really be a competitive advantage in terms of why you would get into a program. And then no, it wouldn't be a disadvantage at all to be in SF for internships or postgrad. It wouldn't be an advantage or a disadvantage, to be honest. I think they're pretty location agnostic. Okay. Sorry I spoke so fast. A ton of questions, great questions. Best of luck with the process. Feel free to reach out to me directly on my profile for a free 15-minute intro call. And feel free to use my code that I'll sort of keep open till the end of the week for 10% off all services. And yeah, best of luck with the process. Enjoy it, and enjoy the rest of the events this week. I wish I had this when I was going through the process. It's a great thing that Leland is doing. And thank you, Emma, for facilitating.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yash. We appreciate it. I just dropped a big comment in the chat with a whole bunch of links, so recommend copying and pasting that so that you have all the resources here. And then Yash fills up quickly, so make sure that you utilize this discount code, grab time with him. We've highlighted one of his most comprehensive packages here. So thank you so much, Yash, for your time today, and we hope that you all learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.